The quiet dawn. The first hint of daybreak didn't blaze forth, but diffused into existence, a tender softening of the profound darkness beyond Eli's small window. Inside his cabin, the air, cool and still, carried the subtle fragrance of beeswax and seasoned timber. He was already stirring, having risen long before the sun, his internal clock attuned to the earth's ancient rhythms, not man's precise tick-tock. These quiet pre-dawn hours were his most fruitful, a sacred pause before the day's inevitable demands closed in. He moved with practiced economy, coaxing the embers in the hearth until a fresh flame eagerly licked at the kindling, its slow warmth gradually dispelling the lingering chill. Eli's gaze drifted to the 3 dozen meticulously crafted wooden spoons arranged on a linen cloth. Each was a testament to hours spent with blade and rasp, carved from seasoned cherry, smooth and elegant, poised for trade. These were his current currency, his investment in the community's welfare and his own sustenance. A soft, almost hesitant rap on the door, much too early for most, startled him. He opened it to find young Samuel Stoltz, barely out of his rumspringer, shifting nervously on the porch. Samuel clutched a small, exquisitely carved wooden bird, its wings aloft as if caught mid-flight. The artistry was exceptional, far surpassing anything Eli had seen from the boy. "Morning, Eli," Samuel murmured, eyes fixed on the floorboards. "My ma said, she said you might be needing more flax for weaving. I brought this." He extended the bird. "It's a blue jay, for the flax." Eli accepted the carving. Its lightness was deceptive. It felt substantial, a tangible piece of Samuel's emerging skill. He turned it in his hands, admiring the minute details of the feathers, the intelligent gleam in the tiny, painted eyes. "This is fine work, Samuel. Very fine indeed." He met the boy's gaze, a rare smile crinkling the corners of his lips. "How much flax does your ma need?" Samuel finally looked up, a spark of pride flickering in his eyes. "Enough for 2 bolts of cloth if you have it. My sister is to be wed next spring." Eli nodded slowly. He had a generous supply of flax, last year's communal harvest having been bountiful. He could spare it. "Come in, we'll measure it out." The exchange was straightforward, honest. No money exchanged hands, only the inherent value of labor and materials. Eli recognized the deeper significance of Samuel's offering. This wasn't merely a trade for flax, but a young man seeking validation for his craft, a quiet plea for inclusion in the community's intricate web of mutual support. As Samuel helped him carry bundles of dried flax from the lean-to, Eli felt a subtle prickle of unease. The familiar rhythm of trade, though robust, had begun to show faint shifts. Demand for his more utilitarian crafts, tools, barrels, wagon wheels, seemed to be softening, while requests for specialized items like Samuel's intricate bird or the delicate lacework he'd seen Martha weaving were growing. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, yet Eli, ever watchful, sensed it. Later that morning, as the sun climbed higher, burnishing the fields in shades of gold, Eli set out with his cart laden with spoons. His destination was the communal market clearing, a bustling nexus where goods were exchanged, news disseminated, and community bonds strengthened. Today, however, a cluster of unfamiliar faces stood near the clearing's edge, their attire subtly different, their presence an unusual sight. They were English, strangers to their community, and they showcased small, brightly colored trinkets, mass-produced and gleaming. One, a stout man with a booming voice, was showing a young Amish woman a delicate necklace that glittered alluringly in the sun. Eli watched as the woman, Sarah Byler, hesitated, then offered a small, hand-woven basket in exchange. The Englishman's laugh grated on Eli's ears. "A basket for this? My dear, this is worth far more. I could offer you this." He produced a handful of gleaming coins. A cold knot tightened in Eli's stomach. Coins. The very symbol of the world he had renounced. The very thing he had labored his entire life to keep out of their quiet, self-sustaining existence. Sarah, thankfully, shook her head, her face flushing. "We don't use money," she said softly, clutching her basket. The Englishman shrugged, then turned his attention to a young boy admiring a polished metal toy. "Perhaps you, young man, would appreciate a real bargain." Eli walked past them, his presence an unspoken rebuke. He arranged his cherrywood spoons neatly at his stall. His usual trading partners approached, their faces alight with welcome. David Lapp, a farmer, needed a new set of spoons for his expanding family. "I've got a fine wheel of cheese, Eli," he offered, "and some fresh eggs." Eli nodded. "Excellent, David. 5 spoons for the cheese and a dozen eggs for 2 more. The exchange was swift, fair, and reassuringly familiar. Yet, as he observed other trades unfolding, Eli noticed more people glancing toward the English traders, their eyes drawn to the manufactured goods. The vibrant colors, the flawless uniformity, the sheer newness of it all. Later, as the market began to quiet, Eli overheard a hushed conversation between 2 women. "My daughter," one whispered. "She asked for one of those shiny ribbons for her hair. Said Martha has one now." "Martha?" the other gasped. "But where would she get coin for such a thing?" The first woman sighed. "Her husband, Jacob, has been selling some of his carvings to the English in town. They pay him in money." Eli's heart sank. Jacob, a skilled woodworker, was a cornerstone of their community. If he was accepting money, even for specialized crafts, it represented a crack in their foundation. The quiet dawn, once a symbol of peace and order, now felt like a fragile moment preceding a storm. The world outside, with its tempting trinkets and convenient currency, was pressing in, threatening to unravel the carefully woven fabric of their self-sufficient existence. He looked down at the handful of precious, hand-carved spoons remaining on his cloth. Were they enough to hold back the tide? He felt a sudden, urgent need to speak with Jacob, to comprehend the allure of this new exchange. The quiet dawn had ended, and the growing noise of a changing world was undeniable. A trade for souls. The scent of cured leather, earthy and rich, hung heavy in Aaron's workshop, a counterpoint to the crisp autumn air that sneaked in through the open door. Sunlight, filtered through the dust motes dancing in the air, illuminated the various tools laid out on his workbench, and all with a polished wooden handle, a well-worn hammer, a spool of waxed linen thread. Today, however, his focus wasn't on mending a harness or crafting a new belt. Today was about shoes. He held up a pair of worn-out boots, the soles nearly gone, the uppers cracked and faded. These belonged to young Samuel, the eldest son of Jacob, the baker. Samuel, despite his youth, had a habit of running his boots into the ground with relentless energy. Aaron remembered a particularly cold winter when Samuel's father had tried to mend his son's boots himself. The resulting patchwork, a testament to his good intentions but poor craftsmanship. Aaron had gently offered to teach him, a gesture that blossomed into a steady trade. He ran a calloused thumb over the damaged leather. "These have seen their share of fields and streams, haven't they, boy?" he murmured to himself, picturing Samuel's bright, eager face. The previous week, Jacob had brought a basket of freshly baked rye bread, still warm, its crust crackling, and a small sack of dried apples. In return, Aaron had promised new soles for Samuel and new laces for Jacob's own work boots. It was a good trade. Jacob's bread was hearty and kept well, and the dried apples would be a welcome addition to the winter larder. Aaron set to work, his movements precise and practiced. He carefully removed the old, brittle soles, the rhythmic tearing sound a stark contrast to the quiet hum of the workshop. He selected a thick piece of oak-tanned leather, its surface smooth and firm, the kind that promised longevity. He cut it with a sharp knife, the blade singing against the tough hide, following the contours of the boot. The smell of fresh-cut leather, pungent and clean, momentarily replaced the workshop's usual aroma. As he worked, a shadow fell across the doorway. "Aaron, are you in?" It was Martha, Jacob's wife, her face flushed from the brisk walk. In her hands, she carried a tightly woven basket. "Jacob sent me. He finished the last of the rye bread and thought you might be ready for these." Aaron nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Just getting to the soles, Martha. Samuel's boots are quite a project." He gestured to the half-repaired boot on his bench. Martha peered at it, her brow furrowed. "He does wear them out, doesn't he? Always running, that boy. He's excited about these new ones. Said he needs them sturdy for the upcoming harvest." "They'll be sturdy enough for anything Samuel can throw at them," Aaron assured her, his voice low and steady. "What have you brought me?" Martha uncovered the basket. Inside, nestled on a soft cloth, were two small, perfectly formed cheeses, their rinds a pale yellow, and a jar of homemade elderberry jam, its deep purple glistening in the light. "The last of this season's cheese, and elderberries from the Southfield," she explained. "Jacob said you mentioned needing some preserves for winter, and the cheese, well, he thought you might enjoy it with his bread." Aaron's eyes lingered on the offerings. The jam was a welcome surprise. Elderberries were not plentiful this year. The cheese, too, was a thoughtful addition. It was a trade that went beyond the immediate need, a sign of their mutual understanding and respect. "This is generous, Martha," Aaron said, his voice imbued with genuine appreciation. "More than enough for a few soles and laces." He paused, considering. "Tell Jacob I'll add a small repair to his buggy harness. The stitching on the breast collar is looking a bit frayed. Consider it a bonus." Martha's face brightened. "He'll be pleased. He was just saying he'd have to get around to that soon." She placed the basket on a nearby shelf. "We'll send Samuel over to pick up the boots tomorrow afternoon, if that's all right." "Perfectly fine," Aaron confirmed, already back to his meticulous stitching. The fine waxed thread pulled taut, binding the new sole firmly to the boot. The rhythmic tugging, the faint squeak of the needle piercing the leather, these were the sounds of his life, the tangible evidence of his self-reliance. He thought of the sweet jam, the pungent cheese, the hearty bread, and knew that tomorrow Samuel would run with renewed vigor, his feet protected by Aaron's careful work. Another season, another trade, another year of quiet, sustained living. The broken iron. The metallic shriek, a sound typically heralding purpose and creation, instead tolled like a death knell in the morning mist. Jacob's gaze fixed on the plowshare, its steel jaw sundered, a jagged wound severing his year's planting. A mocking hoarfrost still clung to the brown stubble of last season's cornfield. 2 weeks. He had a fortnight, perhaps less, before the earth would stiffen, too unyielding for the winter wheat. Without a working plow, the harvest would be meager, the coming cold long and hungry. "A brutal twist of fate, Jacob." Ezra's voice was a soft exhalation in the crisp air. He knelt, gnarled fingers tracing the fracture. Ezra, the community's smith, spoke the language of iron with an intimacy few others possessed. He'd forged this very plowshare 15 years prior, a testament to his skill now yielded to the earth's unforgiving embrace. Jacob grunted, a knot tightening in his gut. The stone was deep, hidden, felt nothing until this. He gestured vaguely at the mangled steel. Can it be mended? Ezra slowly shook his head. To weld steel of this grade, to bear the earth's relentless stress, it would be weaker than new. A temporary patch at best. You need a replacement. His words, stark and unvarnished, extinguished any flicker of hope. A replacement. The phrase hung heavy in the air. Jacob had no coin, no readily available trade goods Ezra would accept for such a vital implement. His thoughts raced, calculating, weighing. He possessed bolts of homespun linen from the previous summer, a dozen cured deer hides, but Ezra's forge demanded fuel and his family sustenance.
He knew Ezra had recently acquired a new, pristine anvil, yet his old one remained serviceable, if somewhat worn.
What would it cost, Ezra? Jacob finally managed, his voice raspy with forced composure. Ezra straightened, his gaze sweeping over Jacob's struggling acres before settling on the lean-to where Jacob housed his hand-carved furniture. I'm short on oak, Jacob. Good, seasoned oak. The kind you use for those rocking chairs. Jacob's jaw tightened. The oak. He'd spent 2 seasons felling, curing, and shaping those timbers. They represented his finest artistry, destined for the spring market in Lancaster, a rare journey that typically brought in the few coins he allowed himself for essential tools he couldn't craft. But the plow was his lifeline. How much oak? Jacob's voice was barely a whisper. Enough for a new forge bellows and a few other sundries, Ezra replied, his eyes assessing. And I could use a sturdy wagon wheel, one of your hickory ones.
Mine's nearing its end.
Jacob's shoulders sagged. A new bellows was a significant undertaking, demanding a considerable amount of specialized timber. The wagon wheel, too, was a week's labor for him, selecting the wood, shaping the spokes, fitting the rim. It was a formidable price. But what alternative was there? The winter wheat would not wait. Agreed, Jacob said, his voice firming with a new resolve. The decision, once forged, brought an unexpected clarity. He would forego the Lancaster journey this spring. He would sacrifice the small luxury of new tools from the English, but his fields would be sown. Ezra nodded, a flicker of respect in his gaze. Bring the oak by midday. I'll begin the design. The wheel, that can wait until the plow is finished. As Ezra departed, the broken plowshare seemed to gleam in the ascending light, a stark emblem of his reliance on the land and on his community. The coming days would blur into a rhythm of sawing, planing, and carving. He would fell the choicest of his remaining oak, the wood he had hoarded for his finest creations, and embark on the long, meticulous process of shaping a new hickory wheel. The thought of trading away such precious materials stung, yet the alternative was unthinkable. His family would not go hungry. He would toil, he would barter, he would endure. The cadence of his existence, dictated by the seasons and the soil, would persist, even with a fractured iron. The grumpy blacksmith. The clang of hammer on anvil echoed even before Jesse reached the blacksmith's dwelling, a rhythmic punctuation mark on the otherwise quiet afternoon. Smoke, thick and smelling of coal and scorched metal, curled from the squat stone chimney, staining the bright blue sky. Eli Yoder, the valley's sole smith, was not known for his welcoming nature. He was a man carved from granite, with a perpetual scowl etched into his features and hands like gnarled oak roots. Jesse pushed open the heavy wooden door, the sound lost in the din. Inside, the heat was immediate, a physical presence that pressed down, making the air shimmer. Eli, stripped to a sweat-soaked undershirt, stood hunched over an anvil, a glowing bar of iron held fast by tongs. Sparks flew in a dazzling arc with each precise strike, illuminating the sweat beading on his forehead and the intense focus in his dark eyes. The shop was a jumble of tools, half-finished projects, and discarded metal scraps, a testament to a life spent wrestling raw materials into useful forms. "Eli!" Jesse called, raising his voice above the clamor. Eli didn't stop, didn't even acknowledge him for another dozen strikes. Finally, he plunged the hissing iron into a barrel of water, sending up a cloud of steam that briefly obscured him. He wiped a grimy hand across his face, leaving a streak of soot. "Jesse, what fresh hell brings you to my inferno today?" His voice was a gravelly rumble, devoid of any warmth. "I need a new plowshare," Jesse stated, holding up the broken one. The edge was twisted, a jagged tooth where it should have been smooth. "Hit a rock near the creek bed. Too stubborn to move, that one." Eli grunted, taking the broken share. He turned it over in his calloused hands, examining the damage with a critical eye. "Lazy iron," he muttered, more to himself than to Jesse. "Or a lazy plowman." Jesse let the barb pass. He understood Eli's temperament. The man had little patience for anything but his craft. "I brought you a cured ham," Jesse offered, gesturing to the burlap-wrapped package he'd set down near the door. "And a bushel of my best winter wheat, freshly ground into flour if you'd prefer." Eli picked up the ham, hefting its considerable weight. He sniffed at it, a flicker of something almost like approval in his eyes. "Good ham," he conceded. "But a plowshare. That's a day's work. Maybe two, with that kind of damage." He tossed the ham back onto the bench with a thud. "And I've got other orders." Jesse knew this was the negotiation. Eli never made it easy. "I can wait, but planting season is upon us. The sooner I have it, the sooner my fields are ready." Eli walked over to the forge, stoking the coals until they glowed with fierce orange heat. "I need a new bellows," he said abruptly, turning to face Jesse. "Mine's got a leak. Been patching it for weeks, but it's past its prime. And that leather, the good, thick stuff, is hard to come by these days." Jesse considered this. Leather was scarce. His own cowhide stores were for mending harnesses and shoes. "I could trade you a set of hand-carved wooden spoons," he suggested. "The kind with the deep bowls, good for stew." Eli snorted. "Spoons won't pump air into my forge, Jesse. I need a bellows, or the hide to make one." This was a challenge. Jesse didn't have a spare hide that met Eli's likely exacting standards. But he also understood the underlying message. Eli was testing him, pushing to see how far Jesse was willing to go for a crucial tool. He thought of the hide he had saved for the new harness he'd been planning. It was a prime piece, thick and supple. "I have a cured cowhide," Jesse said slowly. "One I'd set aside for a new harness. It's a good one. You could fashion a fine bellows from it." Eli's eyes narrowed, a glint of satisfaction in their depths. He rubbed his chin, a raspy sound. "That's better. That's a fair trade for a new plowshare, and I'll even throw in a sharpening of your axe while you're here." Jesse nodded, a quiet agreement. The harness could wait. A working plow was paramount. "Come back in 2 days," Eli commanded, already turning back to his forge, picking up a fresh bar of iron. "No earlier. I'll have it ready." As Jesse left the oppressive heat of the smithy, the cool afternoon air felt like a balm. The ham and wheat were a good start, but the cowhide had sealed the deal. It was a reminder that even in a world of self-sufficiency, dependency on others, especially skilled craftsmen like Eli, was inevitable. And that true value, outside of coin, was measured in necessity and the willingness to part with one's own carefully accumulated resources. The journey home, with the broken plowshare clutched in his hand, felt lighter now, imbued with the promise of future harvests. A coupe for a plow. The crisp morning air, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke, invigorated Solomon as he hitched Bess and Daisy to the plow.
Today was the day. He'd meticulously sharpened the plowshare, its edge gleaming like polished silver under the nascent sun. The wooden handles, worn smooth from generations of use, felt familiar and comforting in his calloused hands. This particular plow, passed down from his dad and his grossdad before that, was a testament to enduring craftsmanship. It represented not just an implement, but a connection to his lineage, a symbol of self-sufficiency. But it was old, very old, and while it still served, the thought of upgrading, of a sturdier, more efficient tool, had been a quiet whisper in his mind. He guided the team to the edge of the winter rye field, the rich, dark soil waiting to be turned for the spring planting. Each furrow Bess and Daisy carved was a line of progress, a promise of future sustenance. The rhythmic creak of the harness, the soft snorts of the horses, the gentle scuff of the plowshare slicing through the earth. These were the sounds of his world, a world he had deliberately chosen. Later that afternoon, after 3 full acres were neatly turned, Solomon unhitched the horses, their flanks steaming gently in the cool air. He wiped a hand across his brow, feeling the satisfying ache in his shoulders. As he led Bess and Daisy back to the barn, he spotted a lone figure walking up the long lane. It was Jacob, a younger man from the next district over, known for his skill with wood and his burgeoning flock of chickens. "Peace be with you, Jacob," Solomon called out, his voice carrying easily across the yard.
Jacob offered a shy smile, adjusting the brim of his straw hat.
"And with you, Solomon? I was hoping to catch you. I heard, well, that you might be looking for a new plow." Solomon paused, leaning against the sturdy oak doorframe of the barn. "It's true. My old friend here has served me well, but a man can always look to improve his tools." He gestured towards the field. "The work is hard, and a good plow makes it lighter." Jacob shifted his weight, kicking at a loose stone with the toe of his boot. "I've been working on a new design. Stronger, better balance. I've made a few for others, and they've spoken well of them." He hesitated. "But what I truly need, Solomon, is a proper chicken coop. My flock is growing, and my current setup is inadequate." A slow smile spread across Solomon's face. This was how things worked. This was the economy he understood. "A coop, you say? A proper one? Built to last?" "Indeed. Predator-proof, good ventilation, ample nesting boxes. I've even drawn up some plans." Jacob pulled a folded, somewhat smudged piece of paper from his pocket, unfurling it carefully. The sketches were precise, illustrating a sturdy structure with thoughtful details. Solomon studied the plans, his mind already calculating lumber needs, envisioning the angles and joints. Building a coop was no small task, but it was within his capabilities. He prided himself on his carpentry, on turning raw timber into functional, beautiful objects. "This is a fine design, Jacob. A man would be proud to house his flock in such a structure." He looked up, meeting Jacob's earnest gaze. "And this new plow of yours, what makes it so special?" Jacob's eyes lit up. "It's the steel, Solomon. I've sourced some particularly good stock, and I've designed the blade with a sharper angle for cleaner cuts, less drag. And the handles, they're adjustable, for different heights, different soil types." He spoke with genuine passion, clearly proud of his work. Solomon walked over to his old plow, running a hand along its weathered beam. "This one has plowed many a field for my family. It's got a history, a story in every scratch." He turned back to Jacob. "But a man must also look to the future. Tell me, Jacob, what would such a coop entail? How many man-hours? What materials?" They talked for a long time as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Solomon described the type of wood he'd use: aged oak for the frame, pine for the lighter elements. Jacob detailed the dimensions of the coop, the number of roosting bars, the exact placement of the egg collection door. There was no haggling, no aggressive negotiation. It was a careful consideration of value, of effort, of need. Each man understood the other's craftsmanship, the hours of labor, the skill embedded in their respective offerings. Finally, Solomon nodded slowly. "I believe we have an understanding, Jacob. A new coop, built strong and true, for a new plow that will turn my fields for years to come." He extended a hand, and Jacob grasped it firmly. The handshake sealed the deal, a silent covenant of trust and mutual respect. The old plow, a faithful servant, would find a new home, perhaps as a garden ornament, or its parts salvaged for other uses. And Solomon, with a new tool on the horizon, felt the quiet satisfaction of a good trade, a pure exchange, free from the complexities of the outside world.
Sarah's skillful hands. The rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of the treadle loom filled the small, sun-drenched weaving room, a counterpoint to the chirping sparrows just outside the open window. Sarah's hands, calloused and nimble, moved with practiced grace, guiding the shuttle through the warp threads. Each throw was precise, each beat of the beater firm, coaxing the flax fibers into a tight, even weave. A fine sheen of sweat coated her brow despite the gentle breeze. The air smelled of raw flax and the faint, sweet scent of beeswax from the loom's moving parts. Her brother, Thomas, leaned against the doorframe, a frown etched deeply between his eyes. He watched her for a long moment, then cleared his throat. "The warp's almost done, ain't it, Sarah?" She didn't look up, her gaze fixed on the emerging fabric. "Another dozen inches, maybe. Why?"
You need it already?
Her voice was soft but firm, not easily swayed from her task. "Ezra Miller from the next valley over. He came by this morning," Thomas said, pushing off the doorframe and stepping inside. His boots scuffed on the wooden floor. "Said his corn crib roof needs patching something fierce. Lost a good bit of last year's harvest to the damp already. He's offering a new axle for the spring wagon, one of them iron ones." Sarah paused, her hands resting on the shuttle. An iron axle was no small thing. Their current one, wooden and patched countless times, was groaning under the weight of even light loads. It had threatened to give out completely last week on the way back from Jacob's with the sacks of oats. "An iron axle," she repeated slowly, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. "That's substantial. He's truly offering that for a few lengths of linen?" "Not just a few lengths, Sarah. He's talking about a proper tarp."
Big enough to cover that whole corner of his crib, and then some. Said his wife, Martha, she'd help with the sewing, if need be. But he needs the fabric quick, before the next rain. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit. He's got a blacksmith friend who owes him a favor, apparently. A good axle, he promised. Sarah rose from the loom, stretching her back. The fabric, still on the loom, was a sturdy, undyed linen, perfect for a waterproof tarp after a good waxing. She ran her fingers over the tightly woven threads. "How much time did he give you?" "He'd hoped to have it by week's end. He's got the blacksmith coming through on Friday." Thomas's voice held a note of urgency. "We need that axle, Sarah. The wagon won't last another month without it." She walked to the storage chest in the corner, pulling out a skein of freshly spun flax thread. Its natural, earthy scent filled the room. "A whole tarp. That's a lot of weaving. And then the waxing."
It's a rush, Thomas. She sighed, her gaze drifting to the window.
The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, but the weather could turn quickly. "I can work longer hours, but it'll mean less time for the garden, for the canning." "I'll take on more of the garden then," Thomas offered immediately, his eyes earnest. "I'll get the boys to help me with the weeding, the harvesting, anything to help. This axle, it's important. It means we can haul more, trade further. It's an investment." Sarah picked up a half-finished needlepoint sampler from a nearby basket.
her fingers tracing the intricate pattern. It was a gift for her mother, a pattern of cornflowers and wheat. And what about the dye for this? I'd planned to gather the indigo leaves tomorrow. Thomas hesitated. That can wait, can't it? The axle can't. He watched her, his expression a mix of hope and anxiety.
He knew how she valued her craft, how she disliked being rushed, especially for a bartered good that needed to be perfect. A shoddy tarp would reflect poorly not just on her, but on their entire household. She set the sampler down, her jaw firming. All right, tell Ezra I can have the fabric ready by Friday evening, but tell him to bring his own beeswax for the waterproofing. I'm running low, and I won't have time to render more. It was a small but significant detail, a subtle reminder of the effort involved, a silent negotiation within the negotiation. And tell him I expect a proper iron axle, solid and true, no cracks, no weak spots. Her gaze met Thomas's, unwavering. My work will be true. His must be too. Thomas's face brightened. I'll tell him. He'll be grateful, Sarah. Truly grateful. He turned to leave, then paused. You're a marvel. You know that? Your hands.
He shook his head, a hint of awe in his voice, then slipped out, leaving Sarah to the renewed rhythm of the loom. The thwack, thwack, thwack continued, now imbued with a new, pressing purpose. The weight of the impending task settled over her, but so did a quiet resolve. The loom, usually a source of steady comfort, now felt like a battleground, where skill and time would wrestle for supremacy. Community and craftsmanship. The rhythmic thwack of the hammer on metal resonated through Jedediah's smithy, a comforting counterpoint to the chirping crickets that had begun their evening chorus. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of a calloused hand, the scent of hot iron and coal smoke clinging to him like a second skin.
Beside him, young Isaac, just turned 16, strained to hold the tongs steady, his brow furrowed in concentration. Hold her firm, Isaac, Jedediah instructed, his voice a low rumble. The heat works with you, not against you. Isaac nodded, adjusting his grip. He was a good apprentice, eager to learn and strong for his age. Jedediah saw a reflection of his own younger self in the boy, before the world had grown so loud and fast. This evening's task was forging a new plowshare for Elam Zook, whose old one had cracked beyond repair. It was a trade, 3 bushels of winter wheat for Jedediah's labor and the iron he'd salvaged from an old wagon wheel. A fair exchange, the kind that built community. Earlier in the day, Jedediah had visited Ruth Stoltz, her small cottage a haven of organized chaos. The aroma of dried herbs hung heavy in the air. He'd brought her a newly sharpened pruning hook, a gift for her meticulous garden.
In return, she'd offered him a jar of her famous blackberry jam and an invitation to help mend her fence posts next week. He'd accepted both gladly. Ruth, with her keen eye for medicinal plants and her knack for storytelling, was a cornerstone of their small community. She knew everyone's ailments and most of their secrets, holding them with a gentle wisdom. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Jedediah and Isaac finally quenched the glowing plowshare in the water trough. The hiss and steam filled the smithy, a satisfying end to a day's honest work. Isaac's face was smudged with soot, but his eyes gleamed with pride. "She's a fine piece, Jedediah," Isaac said, admiring their creation. "Aye," Jedediah agreed, running a practiced hand over the smooth, dark metal. "She'll turn the soil true." He thought of Elam, a quiet man whose hands were as weathered as his fields.
Elam would appreciate the craftsmanship, the hours of sweat and fire poured into an object that would feed his family. It wasn't just a plowshare, it was a promise, a link in the chain of their shared existence. Later, walking home under a sky dusted with stars,
Jedediah carried the memory of the day's exchanges. The wheat, the jam, the promise of shared labor. It wasn't currency, but it was wealth. It was the living breath of their community, a system woven from trust and mutual respect. He passed the Zimmerman farm, where the scent of freshly cut hay still lingered. He remembered helping Daniel Zimmerman mend his barn roof last spring, a task that had taken 3 days and involved most of the able-bodied men. In return, Daniel had helped him harvest his potato crop and gifted him a sturdy oak rocking chair he'd carved himself.
This intricate dance of giving and receiving was more than just a way to acquire goods. It was the very fabric of their lives, a testament to their resilience and their refusal to be swept away by the current of a world that valued profit over people. He thought of the whispers from the outside, the easy lure of ready-made tools and instant gratification. But what was the cost of that ease? A severance from the earth, from one's own hands, from the very people who shared your path.
Jedediah paused at his own gate, the familiar scent of wood smoke from his hearth fire drifting out to greet him. He glanced back at the dark silhouette of the smithy, a beacon of purpose. The work was hard, the days long, but the satisfaction was deep, rooted in the knowledge that he was not just making things, but building a life, one careful, deliberate exchange at a time. The world outside might call it primitive, but Jedediah knew it was simply true. And in that truth, there was strength.
Winter's embrace. The first true snow of the season arrived with an almost audible hush, blanketing the valley in a thick, pristine layer. Samuel watched from the barn door, the biting air stinging his cheeks, a stark contrast to the warmth radiating from the livestock within. The sun, a pale disk in the winter sky, glinted off the untouched expanse, making the world seem momentarily cleansed. This was the season for introspection, for focused craft. With the fields dormant, Samuel's days shifted from tilling and harvesting to woodworking and leatherwork. He needed a new set of harness for Bess, her old one finally succumbing to years of wear and tear, and the long nights were perfect for intricate carving. He'd traded some dried apples and a small barrel of his finest maple syrup with old Jacob a few weeks prior for a prime piece of oak, seasoned and ready.
Jacob, a master carpenter in the next valley over, had admired Samuel's hand-carved rocking horse for his granddaughter, a silent exchange of respect between craftsmen. Inside the workshop, the air was thick with the scent of sawdust and beeswax. Samuel planed the oak, the rhythmic rasp of the tool a comforting sound. He envisioned the curve of the collar, the strength of the buckles. This wasn't just about utility. It was about honoring the animal, about creating something that would last, a testament to thoughtful labor. He remembered his father teaching him. A true craftsman doesn't just make a thing, he understands its purpose, its life. Later that afternoon, a shadow fell across the workshop door. It was Daniel, bundled in a heavy wool coat, his breath pluming in the cold. Daniel, a young man from a more progressive Amish settlement, often visited, drawn by Samuel's self-sufficient way of life.
He carried a small, intricately woven basket, its contents hidden beneath a cloth.
"Samuel," Daniel greeted, his voice a little strained. "The winter has come early this year." "It has indeed," Samuel replied, wiping his hands on a rag. He gestured towards the stove, where a pot of herbal tea simmered. "Come in, warm yourself." Daniel sat, hunching over the mug of tea, his hands wrapped around it for warmth. "My sister, Miriam, she's not well. A persistent cough. We've tried the usual remedies, but it worsens with the cold." He pushed the basket across the table. "She sent these, some of her best knitted mittens, and a small jar of preserved cranberries. She heard you had a supply of wild elderberry syrup last autumn?" Samuel picked up a mitten, admiring the tight, even stitches.
Miriam was known for her knitting, her hands nimble and quick. "I do," he confirmed. "A good quantity. Elderberry is potent against coughs." He noted the slight tremor in Daniel's hands, the worry etched around his eyes. This was more than a simple cold.
She's also very weak, Daniel admitted, his voice barely a whisper. And the baby is due in 2 months. We're concerned. A knot tightened in Samuel's stomach. A difficult winter birth, compounded by illness, was a serious matter. He knew of an old remedy, a poultice of specific herbs and a strong broth, passed down through generations. It wasn't something he usually shared freely, reserved for dire circumstances. "I will give you the elderberry syrup," Samuel said, his voice firm, "and I will prepare a poultice of herbs. But she needs more than that. She needs strength. Do you have any fresh venison?" Daniel shook his head. "No. The hunters haven't had much luck this season. The snow came too fast." Samuel considered.
He had a small smoked ham, cured from a hog slaughtered in the autumn. It was a valuable commodity, meant to last through the leanest months.
But Miriam's need was greater. "I will also give you a portion of smoked ham," Samuel decided, "for broth, and teach you how to make it properly." He looked at Daniel, whose eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. "But you must promise me, Daniel, that you will use every piece of that ham, that nothing will go to waste, and that you will care for Miriam with diligence." Daniel nodded, almost reverently. "I promise, Samuel. We will. What can I give you in return?" Samuel picked up the mittens again. "These are more than enough, but when spring comes and your fields are ready, perhaps you could spare a day of labor, helping me with the early planting." Daniel stood, the weight of the offered items both a burden and a relief. "It would be an honor, Samuel, truly." He took the elderberry syrup, the herbs, and the heavy portion of ham, the scent of smoke filling the workshop. As he left, the faint light of the setting sun cast long blue shadows across the snow. Samuel watched him go, the image of Miriam, frail and expectant, heavy on his mind. Winter's embrace was unforgiving, but it also called forth the deepest forms of human connection and care. A full life. The scent of beeswax and dried herbs hung heavy in Elias's workshop, a comforting aroma that had replaced the acrid tang of machine oil years ago. Sunlight, filtered through the dusty panes, illuminated motes dancing in the air above his workbench, where a half-finished wooden bowl rested. He ran a calloused thumb over its smooth, nascent curve, a testament to hours of patient whittling. His hands, gnarled but strong, had always found purpose in shaping wood, leather, or iron. Today, however, his thoughts were less on craftsmanship and more on sustenance. The last trade with the Miller family for grain had been a lean one, their own harvest struggling with the late blight. Elias knew he needed to diversify his offerings for the upcoming autumn exchange. He envisioned a new batch of his pine tar soup, renowned for its healing properties, and perhaps a fresh selection of hand-dipped candles, their soft glue a welcome luxury in the long winter nights. A rustle at the door announced Ilara's arrival, her face flushed from tending the garden. "The last of the tomatoes are ripening, Elias," she announced, her voice a melodic counterpoint to the rhythmic scraping of his plane. "And the corn is nearly ready for drying. But the blight has spread to the squash." Elias sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I feared as much. It will make our trading harder this year." He put down his tools, the bowl momentarily forgotten. "We'll need to increase our other outputs. More soap, more candles. Perhaps I can finish that set of leather harnesses for the Yoda place sooner." Ilara sat on the stool opposite him, her hands, still smelling faintly of damp earth, resting in her lap. "The Yodas will want a good trade for those harnesses, Elias. Their horses are their livelihood. What will we ask for in return?" This was the crux of their existence, the intricate dance of needs and provisions. Money was a distant, abstract concept,
replaced by the tangible weight of a bushel of apples, the warmth of a woven blanket, or the promise of a season's worth of milk. Elias pondered. Their sheep are doing well this year. Perhaps wool. Elara, could you weave us a new winter coat from it? My old one is threadbare. He looked at his worn, patched coat, a testament to years of service. Elara's brow furrowed. The wool would be a good trade, but the weaving takes time, Elias. Time I need for preserving, for the children's lessons, for the mending. Her gaze met his, a silent plea for understanding. A flicker of tension, subtle but present, passed between them. Elias understood her burden. Their life, though rich in self-sufficiency, was also a constant demanding rhythm. I know, Elara,
But winter approaches, and the old coat won't suffice. Perhaps I could help with the shearing, or even assist with the carding of the wool. We would present it to the Yodas as a combined effort, a more valuable exchange. He rarely offered to help with tasks traditionally seen as hers, but the urgency of the coming cold spurred him. Elara's expression softened. That would be a blessing, Elias. Many hands make light work, as they say. A faint smile touched her lips. And if we offer them a small carving, perhaps a bird for their mantle, along with the harnesses and the wool, it might sweeten the deal further. They've always admired your carvings. Elias nodded, relief washing over him. The carving was a small gesture, but in their world, personal touches held significant weight. A bird it shall be. And I'll start on a new batch of soap tomorrow. The lye is ready. Later that afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elias sat on the porch, watching his youngest, Samuel, chase fireflies in the tall grass. Elara joined him, a basket of shelled peas beside her. Do you ever miss it, Elias? She asked softly, her gaze fixed on the distant, shimmering lights of the distant town, a place they had consciously left behind decades ago. The ease of simply buying what you need. Elias considered her question, the chirping of crickets filling the silence. Ease is a fleeting thing, Elara. What we have here, this life we've built, is not easy, but it is full of purpose, full of connection to the land, to each other. Every nail I forge, every plank I plane, every seed we plant, it has meaning.
It's part of a larger story.
He gestured vaguely towards the fields, the workshop, their modest home. When I see Samuel chasing those fireflies, growing strong on the food we've cultivated, wearing the clothes you've woven, I know we chose well. Our wealth isn't measured in coin, but in the bounty of our hands and the richness of our lives. Elara leaned her head against his shoulder, a comfortable, familiar weight. A full life, she murmured, and Elias felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, as solid and real as the earth beneath his bare feet. The challenges were many, but the rewards were immeasurable, woven into the very fabric of their days. The next morning, the air was crisp and clear. Elias was up before dawn, the aroma of brewing herbal tea filling the small kitchen. He sharpened his tools with a practiced hand, the rhythmic shink-shink, a familiar comfort. Today, he would begin the pine tar soap, its distinctive scent a promise of cleansing and healing.
He would also choose the perfect piece of seasoned oak for the Yoda's bird carving. Each task, each stroke was a deliberate act of creation, a step in the intricate dance of survival and sustenance, a reaffirmation of a life lived by hand, by heart, and by trade.